When you stop and listen to the sounds around you, what do you hear? Wildlife? Laughing people? Rushing water in a nearby stream? Sound is when an object creates energy by vibrating. That energy then bounces off air molecules, causing a chain reaction until eventually vibrating off our eardrums. We are constantly experiencing sound throughout our day, sounds which engage our brains and draw our attention. But how do we process our environment when it's quiet? Pennsylvania has more than 120 state parks, 2.2 million acres of state forest, and 11,000 miles of trails. We set out to learn about the health and visitor experience benefits of a quiet environment, and if our state park and forest system provides these spaces, and the results speak for themselves.
You know, in Alan Seeger, the sounds I'm hearing right now are the stream. We're hearing a little bit of the wind. We're hearing the birds, some of the insects around my head. And these are the things that would define, you know, a fairly classic soundscape of a Pennsylvania forest. One of the things that's come out more and more and more is that the sounds of parks is truly important to a visitor experience. This actually started in Muir Woods in California, and we were doing a study on crowding. But what started coming out in the open-ended questions was, hey, it's not the crowding that's my issue here, it's how loud it is. We did a study where we had people just sit and listen, and they would then rate them from pleasing to annoying. One, we can understand what are people actually hearing. But two, are they detracting from that experience or are they adding to that experience? And what we found is that nature sounds were absolutely adding to their experience. The sounds that were interfering were sounds that are actually pretty manageable. It was the sounds of other visitors that were the biggest detraction from the visitor experience on the trail.
There are large individual differences in how people respond to sounds. And again, that's a lot based on their culture, their history, and their personal experiences. People who grow up in dense urban environments respond to sound differently than people who grow up in forest or country environments. And so that learning and cultural history will also shape how we respond to these sounds. So when we hear a negative sound, our body responds to that as a potential threat. We will physiologically respond as if we're becoming stressed. The core physiological response that underlies this is called the fight or flight response. And that activation is adaptive. It helps you to fight a predator or a threat in sort of global general terms, or run away to safety. And that can disrupt a moment of calm or contemplative reflection, relaxation, but it can also, over time, if that happens frequently, even create a situation that the body perceives as chronically stressful.
Our research has shown that sounds actually affect aesthetic evaluations. In a randomized sample, we were able to show people a photo of a beautiful landscape in Yosemite. It was overlaid with nature sounds. The second group, we showed them that exact same photo, but in that one, it was nature sounds interspersed with cars and planes and other people. And what we found was that the aesthetic evaluation of that photo decreased by 30% when human sounds were overlaid with nature sounds. And so what that shows us is that nature sounds can actually influence our interpretation of aesthetic quality.
My first camping trip was Ricketts Glen, so that was a really cool experience. I got to see stuff that I really don't see sitting in the house. Just getting outside gives you, just relaxes you, it's just a good feeling, especially when you go out and you go canoeing, sitting in that boat, just seeing your scenery, it's just really calming.
Even if it's 30 seconds or a minute, stop and admire a beautiful flower or a tree. even those passing moments of contemplative enjoyment of natural spaces, natural sounds, listen to those birds or the crickets chirping, those can be helpful. One way to think about that is that there's a seesaw, and on one end of that seesaw is fight or flight, and on the other end of that seesaw is rest and relax. Activities such as relaxation or mindfulness or experiencing restorative moments in nature, serenity, calm, all of those things shift us back towards that relaxation and restorative side of our seesaw. Stress tends to influence us where we are weak or injured or have some pre-existing problem. If that happens too frequently or for too long a period of time, we can start to, in essence, become exhausted. And that is where we can benefit from active attempts to move us back towards that relaxation state, such as by engaging with nature or finding other ways for relaxation or recovery.
We set up an experimental design, and during that whole month we had microphones in the woods, not recording conversations, but recording decibels of different types of sound sources. We told people, you are now entering a quiet zone. Please refrain from making noises if you can. But what ended up happening, we were able to reduce the amount of noise by 3 decibels. So a 3 decibel decrease in noise is a doubling in listening area. So things that you might only hear from 30 feet away, you can now hear 60 feet away. So think about that. If you're walking in a forest and you're wanting to hear birds, you want to hear wildlife or the sounds that squirrels are making, you can now hear them at a farther distance. And if everyone contributes to that, you begin to allow that natural soundscape, it begins to express itself in a more holistic way. We teamed up with colleagues from Boise State University who study bioacoustics and look at how acoustic environments affect wildlife. And what we found was that the behavior of the birds did in fact change. They were shifting the timing of their chorus. And when treatments were in place in the park, when people were quieter, the chorus in the afternoon became earlier. When people were louder, the birds waited for the noise to die down before the chorus increased. What they simply were doing was saying, well, that signal to noise ratio, we're not going to beat that. Why don't I save my energy and wait till it dies down? And so this is something that's been found actually in a lot of different studies where wildlife sometimes wait it out or they habituate in some ways if they can.
So we're in Weiser State Forest. It's one of our 20 state forests in Pennsylvania. One of the reasons I came here is because this is called Deep Hollow, and I know the hollow is going to block any of the noise we might hear from the nearby town and agricultural valley. Some of the best places in Pennsylvania to enjoy quiet areas are in our state forest system's designated wild areas. In the 1970s, the State Forest Commission established our Wild and Natural Area program in Pennsylvania. They were set aside because they were large expanses of land that had wild character attributes. And so what I mean by that is places that had a wilderness-like setting. It was undeveloped. There are 19 of these wild areas in Pennsylvania. My favorite one growing up was the Algerine Wild Area up there in the northwestern Lycoming County in the Tiadaghton State Forest. I remember that was really one of my first experiences with true dead silence. Snow on the ground, and I was hunting with my dad, and I just remember just stopping and I said, Dad, I don't think there's a sound anywhere. And you almost, remember at the time I said, you can almost hear the passage of time. It was that quiet.
We really believe that the active prescription, instead of taking an aspirin, take a forest or take a park, and those walks or those sits in those spaces can absolutely be restorative.
There are plenty of ways to minimize noise to enhance your and other people's experiences in the outdoors. Speak quietly when conversing. When in nature, plan some quiet time between you and your group. Keep music to a minimum. If you must listen to music, wear earbuds instead of listening through speakers. but we encourage you to give the sounds of nature a try. Avoid use of motorized recreation in quiet natural areas. Follow the quiet hours posted in state parks. Help with tree plantings. Trees and shrubs can help to reduce noises. Pets are wonderful companions in the outdoors, but keep them on leashes so they don't disrupt wildlife and try to discourage barking. Weigh in when noise threatens quiet areas. So what do you think? Should quiet spaces be preserved? We want to hear from you. Follow us on our social media channels, sign up for our newsletter, but more importantly, get involved! Whoops, sorry. Get involved. Between joining a friends group, advocating, or volunteering, we need your help to conserve these special places.